live in the Boston area. I'm very familiar with Mayor Michelle Wu. I've spoken to her in person, particularly about the housing situation here in Boston. She's the typical Democrat politician. When she was running, she said she ran as a progressive. One of her pressing issues was the housing issue, right? So she has participated in some protests in reference to housing. For example, rent control. That was one of the measures that she's been behind and she's been pushing and still pushing. But I also told you that there were many concerns with Michelle Wu and her so-called progressivism. She is still in some way, shape, or form attached to corporate interests, particularly when it comes to the housing issue. But more importantly, her solution for a lot of the issues that we seem to have in Boston is not in line with what I would consider to be progressivism. For example, I don't think it is a good idea to snitch on residents of Boston. And she's done just that. Get this. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu under fire after sending list of critics and protesters to the police. Yes, you heard that right. So here we're going to get into this article. Here we have the mayor of Boston basically being a snitch. Who does this? Apparently, Mayor Wu does this. Let's get into this article. This is such a mess. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, a Democrat, is facing criticism from Nixonian tactics after her administration admitted to creating a list of her most vocal critics and providing it to local authorities. Now, I'm just going to say this. You know, where I come from, snitching is not a good thing to do. Okay? Like, people will really come after you if you snitch. But Mayor Michelle Wu, she wants to snitch on people, but at the same time, she doesn't want those people to then confront her and ask her why she's doing what she's doing, or to complain about the police coming to their house. Boston, under Michelle Wu's leadership, is turning into like this authoritarian city. We didn't have to deal with this under Mayor Menino. Now, listen, Mayor Menino had some of his own flaws, but even Mayor Menino knew better. Okay. That's why he was mayor for over like 20 years. We didn't really have to deal with this under Marty Walsh, and Marty Walsh was pro-cop because even Marty Walsh knew better. But Mayor Wu is different. She is the PMC Democrat. So she is Harvard educated. She is not the working class candidates that we've had before. So Mayor Marty Walsh grew up in Dorchester, working class family, kind of knew the labor movement very well. So he was very big on like unionizations, still pro-cop, which I didn't like that. But he found ways to try to attract young people, not just to come to Boston, but to stay here and not leave after college. He realized that we need to offer more things for younger people to do in this city. So he understood some things. Okay. Mayor Menino, who was mayor for like over 20 years, was a little bit more, I guess I would say a little bit more conservative. I mean, he was a Democrat, but he was a little bit more conservative in the sense that he actually wanted to close bars earlier. That didn't end up happening because he did not run again for re-election, but he wanted to make it more of a family city. But again, Mayor Menino grew up in Boston, working class, very different. And then you have Mayor Michelle Wu, and she is snitching on her own residents. Let's go on. The list was made in response to a request from the Boston Police Department after the mayor had been harassed and physically intimidated by individuals for several months outside her home, at city functions such as the annual neighborhood park coffee hours and at other public events. Now, I want to explain, because I've been to the neighborhood park coffee hours. And so has my producer, Eric, actually went with me to one of those as well. In fact, I have a video about it on my channel where I actually confronted Mayor Michelle Wu. The reason why some of these protesters are going to her home is because she has been hiding from them. She is not answering their questions. And what are some of the questions that they have? Some of them are very bitter about the mandates. Yes, believe it or not, even though Boston is blue, that doesn't mean that everyone who's blue here is okay with the mandates. There are also Republicans that live in Boston as well, believe it or not. Some of it is about that. Some of the protests have been about the housing issue, about people being kicked out of public housing, about Mayor Michelle Wu allowing privatization of these housing units, about her allowing other companies and developers to come in and buy these buildings and kick these residents out of their homes and their neighborhoods and their communities that they have known for so long. We've been talking about this for quite a while. In fact, I've interviewed residents in Boston that have been dealing with this. So there are many criticisms of Mayor Wu. And when she is confronted about these questions, it has gotten to the point where she just runs away or she hides in her office and prevents the residents from actually asking her tough questions. If you go out into the neighborhood and you're going to talk with the people, you need to be prepared and ready to answer the questions that they have, whether they're questions you want to hear or not. But you're kicking people out of their homes and then you expect them to be nice and not question you about it. The PMC liberal, professional managerial class, they talk a good game when they are running. They're all progressive. They all agree with these progressive issues when they're running for office. But the moment they're in, they end up being just another corporate Democrat shill. And Mayor Wu is no different. No different. Now, she'll tell you that she grew up in Boston. She'll tell you she's from the streets here. Yeah, but she grew up here, but you went to Harvard and you moved on. You are not of the same class as the people that you once grew up with anymore. And she forgot that very quickly. Very quickly. Let's go on. The acknowledgement by the administration that had compiled the document came after the list was uncovered in an email obtained through a public records request by Wu's opponents, the outlet noted. So they found it. Let's go on. Oh, that's her, by the way. For those of you who don't live here and not familiar, that's her. Oh, and guess what they ran on when she was running? They said we could have a woman of color finally become mayor of Boston. And this is why I told you before. Yes, representation is important, but who is the representation and what exactly are they doing? If they're going to be just like all the other establishment politicians we had before, they're better off staying at home. Now, it goes on to say the tactics used by the administration raise concern over whether Wu and her administration are attempting to silence or to intimidate her critics, many of whom have protested outside her home. The request came after many of the individuals on the list repeatedly impeded the Dorchester Day parade to harass Mayor Wu and her family and staff, yelling through megaphones at her and her children for nearly 90 minutes as they marched in the parade, despite being asked by parade organizers to leave the parade route. So this is a public event. They have every right to be there. Every right to be there. They have every right to confront her about their concerns, especially since she's hiding from them. When people show up to her office to have these conversations with her, she runs and hides. And it's not just the mandates and it's not just the housing issue. There was also the issue with the restaurants in the North End, where Mayor Michelle Wu decided to make them pay, I think it was like $7,000 cleaning fee, street cleaning fee, so that they can allow their customers to eat outside. So you have to remember this was towards the height of the pandemic. And the only way these restaurants could operate and stay in business was to have the customers eat outside. Well, if you've been to Boston and you've been to the neighborhood, the North End, you know that it's very dense. There isn't a lot of sidewalk space. So obviously that would hurt those restaurants in the North End. So that's like where a lot of the Italian restaurants are, right? So She only opposed the fine on them, though, no other neighborhood. So they showed up at her office. She didn't want to talk to them. They showed up at the committee meetings. She didn't want to talk to them then. And they made a big scene. And so she took it back. They went to the news. They went to the media. And then she said, okay, I'm going to take it back. That's what you have to do, because otherwise they just continue to treat you as such. Following the Dorchester Day parade, on June 5th, 2022, Boston police met with city staff on June 10th to make a safety plan for the upcoming Bunker Hill Day parade on June 12th. And the then captain of the district overseeing Charlestown asked for a list of individuals who had been involved in public disruption and harassment of the mayor at the Dorchester Day parade and outside her house. The email was sent as a follow-up immediately after that meeting. So now we have a police state. Now we have police officers in Boston asking for a list of names. This is not okay. Period. Now, what should Mayor Wu have done? Her response should have been, you have to protect those residents' privacy. No, I'm not giving you a list of names of people. They have every right to protest, especially in a public space. But no. She cowered and gave them names. So here we have someone who was supposedly progressive being a friend of the police state. Let's continue. The Herald reported that Wu's actions drew comparisons from some critics to the late President Richard Nixon, who was famous for compiling lists of political opponents. Let's go on. Sent via email from Wu's former director of constituent services, Dave Vittorini, to Boston Police Captain Robert Cecilio. The list, as reported by the Herald, contains the names of Wu's most vocal opponents, such as Boston City Council at-large candidate Catherine Vitale, several anti-jab activists who have been protesting at Wu's house, and the North End restaurant owners who have opposed Wu's policy. So you see what they're doing? They're going after the small businessmen. All those restaurants in North End, those are small businesses. They're going after the small businesses for complaining that she was expecting them to pay $7,000 a month. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. And of course, those who were against the mandates. And by the way, you got to remember, my state was locked down. Let's go on. The list included no reason as to why the names were given, and also listed the Mendoza brothers from the North End and a woman with the last name of Thoy, who was arrested before. Wu aides Tiffany Chu and Brianna Miller, who were also CC'd on the email, which was sent after loud protests at the mayor's home in the Roslindale neighborhood of Boston last year. An ordinance was passed in the city prohibiting protests outside of Wu's home during certain hours. Wu, the first woman and first Asian American to hold top political office in Boston history, was sworn into office on November 2021. Now, I want to just show you an example, because here's a protest, actually more so a confrontation, where they went to her office, not her home, went to her office. These parents had their names put on a list. These are parents, had their names put on a list. They went to confront her, and she's hiding and being protected by staff and police. Listen to this.
Games with us, sir. We didn't come here. We are people who have families. We're being targeted on a list, and you giving fuck about a door being knocked on like this? A knock, knock, knock. I want the person who put my.
So it says Boston is under tyrannical rule. And this is true. People need to pay attention to what's happening here.
Sir, we didn't come here. We are people who have families. We're being targeted on a list, and you giving fuck about a door being knocked on like this? A knock, knock, knock. I want the person who put my fucking name on a list to target my family to come up here. They're gonna sit here.
You hear this? So this is a parent who said, I want the person who put my name on this list to target my family. They weren't just targeting the parents, but her family members have been targeted. And she's talking about Mayor Wu, who was again hiding in her office. So I wanted to show you guys this because when people say, well, they shouldn't be outside of her house, when they go to her office, she hides too. Let's go on because there's more parents. It's not just this one.
Here and tell me that I can't knock on a goddamn door that my tax-paying dollars pay for? You've got to be kidding me. Bring these people up right now. We didn't come here to spend the day with you, no offense.
No babysitting. We're old enough. Okay, we don't need babysitters.
We have children. When you target us, you target my son. When you target me, you target my son.
These are Boston girls.
We are mothers.
Terrible.
We are mothers. When you target our families, you target little children. This is not a game.
No.
Terrible.
Do any of you have children? This is not a game. Targeting me, targeting my son.
That's right. FBI, Department of Homeland Security. Let's talk about where this list went to. That's why you're hiding these people. Their jobs need to be taken from them. They need to be removed from their positions. Mayor Wu down. This is completely unethical, completely illegal.
So I don't know if you guys heard that, but she said FBI, Homeland Security, let's talk about where this list went to. It's not even just going to the police. That's how bad this is now. So they're giving out the list of names? This is what we've come to? Mayor Menino is probably rolling over in his grave. Never would have come to this. Never would have come to this.
To target law-abiding citizens, mothers, advocating for their children's future.
This is not a mistake. This is not a mistake. And it's not an error. This is deliberate. Deliberate.
Mayor's office, the Boston police, arrested 3 times in the past year and has DCF trying to take her kids away. What advice would you give to somebody like that?
This is how far it's gone. Where one of the women that's there, they actually had DCF, you know, they're the ones that come in, the baby snatchers. They had DCF show up to her house, threatening to take her kids away from her. That's how far this has gone. That's not Mayor Wu. That's someone who works for her. But you see what's happening here?
To get all that information, you have to know the public.
What do you do? What do you do when you are a single parent on welfare and the entire local government is coming after you? I don't have money for public records requests. I don't have money to file lawsuits. What do you do when your local government has made you a political target? They're trying to take my kids. They've put me in jail 3 fucking times in the past year. What are we supposed to do?
Now, here you have someone who is on welfare. She doesn't have the money to pay for an attorney. And please don't come at me and say, well, the state will provide one for you. Good luck with the state provided attorney. Good luck with them. Okay. Targeting poor people. This is a mess. Whether you agree with their position or not, you don't have to agree with their position. That doesn't mean that they should have DCS show up at their house and threaten to take their kids. Someone on welfare.
With no reason to arrest. They were telling us they're going to arrest us for protests there were political candidates on that list. There's mothers on that list. Multiple of us have been targeted by DC.
Nobody on that list is a criminal.
Open in court, wasting the time.
So where did this list go, and what was the reason for this list?
This is the thing. I don't have that context for you.
So who would, right?
And
That's the question.
I can't give you the same answer.
You're a pawn. Go find somebody who has an answer. You're a pawn. They're all pawns. These people are passing these laws, these unconstitutional laws, to silence us and using you guys all to do their dirty work. And you're just fucking standing here letting them. Go find somebody who has answers. It's been 2 years, Stephen. 2 years, Cheevers, that we've been facing off with you guys. Get some fucking answers.
about your work.
This department has allowed
This is
these
your work
things to
now, so
happen.
telling us we
These
can't be here
things
is
are
bullshit.
happening because of this law
And he knows it's
enforcement
bullshit.
turning their head away. And now you're telling us we have to leave so they can continue to ignore us. And then you're going to threaten us 3 times today for arrest for no law. You mentioned no law. We are here protesting, and you don't know the first thing about protest. Please, you get your legal dictionary over to him ASAP. He's the leader of the police officers here, and he thinks that protest is illegal. He doesn't know it's a protected right. He thinks he can put parameters on us how we disrupt. We came here to disrupt because we're very angry, because our families are being targeted. We're being targeted. Why is somebody's kids being threatened to be taken away from her? I had the head of EMS last week tell me that he was going to turn me in to DCF. Do you see how it's not just a...
My house was surveilled.
I had a private investigator sitting in the parking lot of my job.
I get stopped in.
Do you see the type of retaliation that they've been experiencing? A private investigator showing up at your job, sitting in the parking lot to threaten you so that you'll stop protesting? People need to know about this. Don't feel sorry for Mayor Wu. Don't feel sorry for her that people were protesting outside her home. This is why they're outside her home. Look at now. They're at the office. She's not even there. She won't even talk to them. I'm going to keep it real. I don't have kids, but any of you in the chat, if you have kids, how would you feel if the mayor of your city put your name on a list and then DCF is showing up at your house because you disagreed with the mandates? DCF shows up at your house threatening to take your kids away. How would you feel? But this is the woman of color that everybody said, let's put her on board and make her mayor because she's a woman of color and she's Harvard educated. This was the one that everybody was propping up and said, she's going to be the one to take Boston forward. She's been taking Boston backwards. I'll finish this up here.
For no reason by somebody
And this
calling
guy
my
wants to put
phone.
us in
A
handcuffs.
police officer from house call.
Stand down. They're standing down at Mass and Cass. Stand the fuck down here.
This is bad.
It could happen in your city. It could be your mayor next. But no mayor should be handing over a list of people's names to the police. What is this? What is this? Is Michelle Wu Batman? So disgusting. So disgusting. Like I said, Mayor Menino is probably rolling over in his grave. But she was the progressive that everybody wanted. And you'll see this when we get into the next story about Justice Democrats. You'll see this because they all seem to have something in common. These so-called progressive candidates that run on these progressive issues, and then they end up being just like the establishment opponents that they ran against. I don't believe any of these people are progressive. I think these people tell you what you want to hear so that they'll get elected. They know, especially Boston, they know that Boston, there's a lot of young people here, a lot of progressive energy in the area. They tell you what you want to hear so that they can get in. And then they end up being just like everybody else. But hell, even Mayor Menino wouldn't have done this. But it's similar. We've seen this before. Mad Crab just said, remember when AOC had Capitol Police show up to a podcaster's house? LOL. Yeah. The same people who stood out there saying Black Lives Matter, who said what happened to George Floyd was wrong, who said we got to do something about police. They need to be held accountable. The same ones who said that they support defunding the police. Once those people got in office, they became snitches who backed the police state. Terrible. Such a disgrace. I'm going to go to some of the comments here. Thank you so much for the super sticker, Bad Hearts. What's going on? Pastor Wheeler says, not if Wu has anything to do with it. Sadly, she has opened parks and green spaces for development. Yeah, I see you responding to Jeffrey Long. Yeah. Yep. Not for the people, for developers. Thank you for the super chat, Susan. What is their excuse horrendous and painfully criminal, hard to watch. It's really upsetting. Really upsetting. I hope someone runs against her. Oh no, like but no, everybody fell for the optics. She could be the first woman of color. She's still Harvard, boo. You think she gonna turn her back on her corporate peers?